Today on the Writing Coach podcast, I have Patty McGee. Patty, welcome to the show.
I am really happy to be here with you.
Well, you were just telling me that one of the best bios you have got came from a student. So maybe tell us
Yes.
what that student described you as and how that explains what you do.
Yes, I love this story. I wish I had recorded it in some capacity, but it was just a gift to overhear. I was leaving a school, and the second grader was walking out with her grandpa, and she pointed to me and she said to her grandpa, "That lady's not a stranger, grandpa. She's a traveling teacher," which means she goes into schools to help make teachers' jobs just a little bit easier. And sometimes she teaches us.
I love it.
Mhm.
Beautiful. So you are a teacher of teachers in the school system, and sometimes you're teaching the students as well.
Yes.
So, like me, most of your career has been focused on understanding language and writing and working with people to help improve their writing. How did your interest start in language and writing? Was it when you were young?
Sort of. I loved to read. Um, and I was quite good in school when I wanted to be. um, and that didn't really set me up for success as a teacher because I was good at it and I didn't know how to work through the hard parts. And so that's when I became very interested, especially in writing, because, I'm a teacher, and the only way I knew how to respond to writing was to correct it. And I was doing a number on the hearts of my kids and chipping away at their confidence and willingness to show up on the page. So that's really where my passion started, with a problem of practice in the classroom.
And so, really trying to figure out the best pedagogy. Oh, I can't even talk. Pedagogy.
Mhm.
There,
Yeah,
nailed it.
yeah.
So, trying to figure out the best pedagogy for students and ensuring that we can help improve their writing, but in a way that makes them feel confident.
Yes. And what I've done since then with that concept and with that book that was about 9 years ago, um, is I've realized it's just a universal way of responding to people who are looking for feedback rather than fixing it for them.
And what's that book called?
That book is called Feedback That Moves Writers Forward.
It's so interesting because you say your interest was in helping students improve. But I think of my clients as students. I suspect you mean younger people, but working with, sometimes retirees writing their
Yeah.
first novels. It's extremely important that I
Yeah.
teach them the skill set and the craft in a way that is encouraging and that does not discourage
Yes.
them. Because putting down someone's writing, whether they're 7 years old or 70 years old, can do as much damage.
Yeah. It's so true. And sometimes I think it does more damage us with those of us who are older, because we've been corrected to oblivion. Like, pretty much the only response to writing that I've received is correction throughout my life. And I think that, number one, it doesn't work. Number two, it hurts our hearts. So I'd love to describe to you kind of where I found this model of feedback and why it's just rich and effective.
Well, as a teacher of writing, you've got the perfect audience here. So I'm on the edge of my seat. Of course, I'd love to hear that. Hit me with it.
Okay. Well, uh, I must have been 10 or 11, and my dad decided he wanted to learn to crochet. I don't know anybody else who has had that same experience. um, so my Aunt Helen, his sister-in-law, master crocheter, she would come and she would give him crochet lessons. And when I was trying to work through this problem of correction as instruction, I watched her. Now, she wasn't a teacher, um, but this is what it looked like. She would come and sit next to him, and then she would say, with her own materials, by the way, and then she would say to him, like, "Tell me what's going on with your blanket," because that was his only genre. blanket, no
Mm-hmm.
scarf, no glove. Um, and he would usually say something self-deprecating before anybody else could. And he's like, "Oh, there's all these holes in here." And she's like, "Yeah, but do you see where you counted your stitches? When you count your stitches, that helps them stay in order and that helps you avoid holes." So she starts with, here's a strength and here's the impact of that strength. I mean, goodness gracious. I was like, okay, that alone needs to happen when giving feedback to anyone about anything. Like, even when my husband cooks dinner for me, like, here's what was really delicious, and here's what needs a little more time. It's just, it's a great way to respond to other humans. So she would then say, instead of saying, "But your holes are all over the place," she would say, "You counted your stitches. So that means you're ready to use that counting to fill in the holes." So the feedback was an invitation built on a strong foundation. And
Wonderful.
then she would be crystal clear. She wouldn't just say, "Okay, fill the hole. Now take that hook over there and try and hook," or she wouldn't take the blanket out of his hand and do it for him. She had her own materials and she showed step one, step two, step three, maybe four, in order to fill the hole. And then she would sit with my dad as my dad was filling the holes. Now, this would take 5 minutes at the most, but because there were lots of holes, he would have lots of practice and he would become a stronger crocheter. And that's what she was looking at. How can I help you be a stronger crocheter each time? And I know in the editorial world that we're not necessarily teachers of writing, though we can be in ways. Like, when we do see strong writing, it's funny because my editor of my first two books, she would point out parts in my manuscripts that were strong, and I was like, "Yeah, you wrote that, Wendy."
I think
So
I think every coach and instructor has had that beautiful moment where you're looking at someone's
yes,
stuff and you go, "I love this moment," and they say, "You told me to put that in there."
yeah, exactly, exactly. So just that type of feedback repeated over time. And it doesn't have to be the only type of feedback when we're in the writing world. We know we have deadlines, all of that, but there is a way to show any writer a strength and why that's so important. Because oftentimes we don't know, because we know what's wrong, because that's the major feedback. So I don't know if this will be on video or not, but I just, and anyway, want to show you this perfect little photo.
Oh,
There's
there it
my
is. Okay, so
Aunt
there's
Helen and my dad. And then eventually that's blankets he was making himself where Aunt Helen didn't have to help.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, and a blanket is a great metaphor for writing because how do we
Right.
write a book or an essay one
Yes.
sentence at a time, one paragraph
Yes.
at a time, just like crocheting a line in a
Yes.
blanket?
Yep.
I had a
Exactly.
similar experience on the opposite end where I had my first book come out and I wanted to put together an author website. And I had a friend who was very good at design, like an amazing artist, like a whiz with computers. And I asked him to show me how to build a website. And he was so frustrated with me and he was terrible at explaining it. And I had this moment where I go, "Oh, I think I'm pretty good at teaching. I think this teaching thing is actually a unique skill set." And of course, there's that people say those who can't do teach. Um, they've never been teachers. It is
Right.
an extremely unique and challenging job that is not easily done. And so, I think there's two examples of someone kind of just not having that teaching skill set and me learning through that. And then you seeing a master teacher and learning from it. And either way, it speaks to the power of effective teaching and coaching.
Yeah. Exactly.
Speaking of editing and editing in a way that inspires people. I think beginner authors that I often work with are very concerned about their voice as an
Yes.
author. And quite often they seem to think their voice is their own unique take on grammar, perhaps. And so when an
Yeah.
editor comes in and starts fixing their punctuation, suddenly they say, "Oh, you're stealing my voice." And so, how do you respond to that as someone who kind of lives at that intersection between voice and grammar?
Yeah. Well, I do think grammar can be used artfully so that our voice is fully apparent on the page. However, there needs to be a lot of practice and understanding of just, let's say, how sentences work at the basic level in order to then effectively break the rules to create your voice. And the vast majority of us were taught grammar in a way that wasn't really thorough and effective. And so we grow up, love to write, but may not have the command of certain expectations that, when not followed, make the writing awkward or clunky. So it's like Picasso, like he was a fine artist before he went all Picasso on us. And so that's how I feel about using grammar in order to really establish our voice on the page.
I feel like I came out of high school knowing that a sentence had a subject and a predicate. But
Mm-hmm.
I think if you had handed me a sentence and say, what's why is the sentence clunky? I never would have been like, oh, there's an object missing, or
Yeah,
like I feel like I got the bare baseline of understanding and only kind of like the fringes of understanding, and not a
yeah,
real technical ability to apply the theory in a way that improved my writing.
yeah, absolutely. Same here.
Well, you have a book called Feedback That Moves Writers Forward. Is that the
Mm-hmm.
first one or is that the second one?
That's the first one.
That's the first one. Okay, so what was the
Yes.
second one?
The second one is called The Seven Essentials of Writing Workshop for every classroom and every writer. So it was basically, my books are so based in classroom practice, um, and that teachers are trying things out for me. So I have, like, things being tested and tried, and I revised. This one was basically from my Google Drive because it was COVID. So I put
Okay.
together, just a very simple guide to the things that we need for writers to thrive. And it's seven things. And being a traveling teacher, most of those things are not found in schools that I've been a part of.
The majority of my teaching is via online courses, and the majority
Mm-hmm.
of my coaching and editing is via Zoom with writers
Mm-hmm.
all over the world. I have taught
Cool.
workshops, though, or more specifically retreats in person. Vastly different experience teaching in
Yes.
a classroom with people breathing the real air
Yep.
than teaching online, and I would argue probably much more effective in person. So as someone who's tested their theory and had all this experience in classrooms, do you have any advice for translating over what works in classrooms and in classroom workshops into something like online seminars or coaching sessions?
Mm-hmm. So I believe that we have gotten tech crazy, that we have so many technological tools at our disposal that we're missing the essential human connection, the social brain, which is basically the gatekeeping of learning. And so when we create things for people to be a part of, like a webinar, like a online course, we want to keep the slides to a minimum and basic. We want to have people doing something more often than hearing us talk. We want breakout rooms. So there's that human connection, like in a classroom or in a workshop where we might make small groups for feedback, and trying to use technological tools only when they can't be replaced with something else.
Mm,
So simplifying,
yeah.
I think that's really the most important thing.
Love it. I mean, I think you really identified there one of the challenges of teaching online is that it lends itself much more towards a sort of university lecture style
Yeah.
than it does breakout groups and those sorts of
Mm-hmm.
things. And yet, increasingly in my own work, I've been working in more and more exercises and less of me trying to be a university professor. And I find not only are people more engaged, I feel like we're all having more fun too.
Yes.
You know, I have some part of my
Yes.
mind is like, they're here for you, Kevin. They're here to hear your genius. But I'm like, no, they're here to improve their writing. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe the best way to do that isn't listening to me jibber jabber about literary theory, and it's about them filling out a worksheet that forces them to think about their story in a way they haven't before.
Yeah. It's still your genius. It's just how you're translating your genius to those who are there to learn from it.
I love it. I love it. Well, you have a brand new book out that came
I
out
do.
recently called Not Your Granny's Grammar. So tell me,
Yes.
what is granny grammar? What does that title mean?
Yes. So, oh gosh, it's been something I've been working on in my mind and in my instructional practice for a very long time, because I think every listener here has had the experience of a worksheet where we identify part of speech, or we fill in a blank, or we diagram a sentence, and then poof, we're supposed to know how to use grammar proficiently, immediately, and without mistakes. And that's just not realistic. That's not how we learn. That doesn't, there's like so many missing ingredients in that approach that I have been, again, that was a problem of practice for me that I was just trying to figure out. And it has taken a very long time. But you know how you were saying, like, the fun part when you're holding, say, a webinar or a course or something like that online, um, that when you're giving more experiences to then understand and learn from your genius, then there is that greater investment. And I want to say that this approach is definitely more fun, but I want to say it's playful. Like,
Mm,
it's playful for us, not in a game sort of way, because there are grammar games. But the thing about games is there's a winner and a loser. And if we're already feeling like the feedback we get is constantly being corrected, um, and then we're playing a grammar game and we don't know grammar very well, so we're going to lose. There's a very good chance. So we've added more shame on top of already feeling uncomfortable. So this is an inquiry based approach to grammar with play as a way to understand grammar.
wow. Okay, so many authors I work with are terrified of grammar. I have to
Mm-hmm.
admit. I know extraordinary novelists who kind of freeze when I ask them if there should be a semicolon here or not. So,
Yeah.
how do you communicate that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe not even just playfulness, but looseness. Kind of like I feel
Yeah.
like the second we start talking about grammar, my clients like get tight, you know, like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know if this should be an M dash or a colon. How
Right.
can you tell me a little bit more about this idea of being a little loose or being a little playful in your
Yeah.
approach to teaching this?
I think some of the basics of it is also choice.
Hmm.
So I'm thinking about, novelists and their like discomfort around grammar, and let's just talk how we can put two simple sentences together and the effect that it has. So a semicolon is showing us that these two sentences are very important to think about together. But I didn't want them separated because they need to really be considered together. I could also use a coordinating conjunction, which we usually use the acronym fanboys because those are the coordinating conjunctions. And it would have this effect. We could also use subordinating conjunctions and it would have this effect. If we want to also think about the M dash, it will have this effect. So I think it's a matter of us knowing the effect
Mm-hmm.
of the things that we know we want to do, and there's nuances in them, and then how they contribute to the meaning that we're trying to make on the page.
I think almost every writer and editor out there has some sort of rebel spike in them, or some sort of part of them that wants to be wild and break the rules.
Yeah.
As someone interested in teaching and writing and grammar, are there any grammar rules that you're happy to ignore? Do any of the rules going to drive you crazy?
Oh yeah, definitely. Number one, I really don't care if I end a sentence with a preposition.
Hmm.
If it makes sense and it's striking the tone that I want it to, prepositions can be at the end.
Wow.
I am
Okay.
not
You're
too
blowing my
concerned about
mind
that.
here.
I'm not sorry.
I can't stand it. You put it. It just looks so awkward at the end of a sentence. It feels
Yeah.
wrong to me.
Well, if you want that tension in your writing,
Great point.
maybe
Effect,
that's
right? That's what
yeah,
matters.
yeah. Yeah, that's one that I don't pay as much attention to. Also, the comma that creates a compound sentence,
Hmm.
because it seems to be a rule that's kind of going the way of the buffalo. Like
Mm.
it's used sometimes used more for effect, but it's still a rule that if you're going to connect two simple sentences with a coordinated conjunction, you need a comma there. But I don't think that is that important any longer.
Interesting. Are you
Mm-hmm.
familiar with Cormac McCarthy's novels at
Yes.
all? Do you know that he hates punctuation?
Good.
He once was interviewed by a high school student, and the high school student said,
Oh,
"Why do you have so little punctuation?" And he said, "Oh, I don't like all those little dots messing up my page." Which I
that is
thought was, kind of gets
fantastic.
back to what you were saying about he has a very specific effect he's looking for with his
Yeah.
writing, and that comes right down to how the page looks. I tend
Yeah.
to err way more on the side of punctuation. And I don't know, maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's because I'm like a Star Trek nerd or something, but I just think people read so fast, and any
Yeah.
opportunity to slow them down a little bit,
Yeah.
I'm like, I want that Captain Kirk drama. I
Yes.
can't put those commas in there.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
but again, clearly McCormick and I are going for a different feel to our writing.
Yes. Two different voices.
Yeah, it comes right
Mm-hmm.
back to our voice conversation. Well, speaking of
Mm-hmm.
voice, I mean, it's almost, in a conversation where we already touched on we're overly dependent on technology, it's almost frustrating that like I can't have a conversation with anyone anymore at this point without addressing the elephant in the room, which is AI, obviously. And I think one of the major fears that people have about AI is that writing is going to become generic and bland and everything's going to sound the same. So, as someone who teaches writing and obviously cares about voice, what are your thoughts on AI and also maintaining someone's view on the world and how they express it through their own words?
Yeah. Well, I think that even strengthens even more the need for everyone and all writers to know standard grammar and to know their voice in how they choose to use standard grammar or not use it, so that when they're looking for feedback from AI, if it doesn't sound like them, if it's not the way you want it to be written, then we have the discerning eye. We still own our writing then. And AI can be helpful, but AI is not and will never be a human who has the creative power of choosing how to express themselves on the page.
I think that critical eye is really important as more and more
Mm-hmm.
authors do use AI, and not just for writing, but for coaching and for
Mm-hmm.
brainstorming and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Many a time I've met with a client and they're like, I'm super confident in the scene this week because my AI said it's great.
Yeah.
Right? It's like we cannot turn over our gut instinct and also
Mm-hmm.
our educated knowledge of what
Mm-hmm.
works and what doesn't in storytelling and writing and say, oh,
Yeah.
well, the AI said I did it right. The AI is
Yeah.
not the ultimate arbiter on what a good story is, or definitely not what a great sentence is. And so while
Exactly.
it's a useful tool, I think we also need to be conscious of who we are as writers and what we want to say and what the most effective
Mm-hmm.
way to say that is.
Yeah. 100%. And I think there's a place for it in terms of uh, yet another resource to help us uh, write in a way that is really what we want to say. And we know that takes a long time. I know for some people it just comes out a lot more naturally, but I mean, one of my favorite essays is The Shitty First Draft.
Mm,
Um,
Lamont.
from Anne Lamott. And it's like if we don't go through that angst of trying to get what we're trying to say on the page in a really crappy way
Mm.
and then move from there, um, it really isn't the art that it needs to be, you
Mm.
know? Like
Yeah.
there we look at AI as a tool, totally, but there's still that process. And it's so funny and um ironic that of all authors, Anne Lamott is one of my favorites. And to know she goes through that and is afraid that when she's on the way to the dentist, that something is going to happen to her and somebody will then read her writing and they'll think she's a fraud. Like that is part of the creative process. And it's a yucky part for me. That's not my most fun part. I love to revise. Um, but I do like to have other tools, human people reading my writing. I'll have an AI read it. I'll look at it. I'll ask for a couple different versions of it, even, and I'll take from it if I really think it sounds better in different parts. But that's my choice because I know what I want to say.
When you say that revisions is the favorite part of your writing process, when I look back at maybe my education was unique, but I feel like I was never taught the importance of revisions. I feel like so many people go through their entire education thinking you have one shot at it, probably the night before it's due, and then
Yep.
you hand it in and it's graded. Like, I really feel like I
Yeah.
never revised a paper until my master's thesis. It's not
Mm-hmm.
until you're in grad school that you have someone say, you could do better. You could do this part better. What about
Mm-hmm.
this, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
as someone who teaches educators, what are your recommendations for ensuring that people get a better understanding? Well, people, children, everyone get a better understanding that writing is not a one shot thing, that it's an
Yeah.
iterative process that develops through revisions.
Yeah. Well, I would start with the research. There's decades deep research around writing instruction. Um, that comes from Stephen Graham and Karen Harris and their crew, that a writing process is essential to writing achievement. So if our process all the time with every single thing we write is to write the best we can on the first time, on the first try, we're not going to become stronger. Yes, sometimes in schools and in life, we need to fill out something quickly, or we need to do a writing sample and it's timed. And we need to, yeah, that's almost its own genre. Like, what are you going to do when you have to write it fast? Here's what you do. But how do we improve your skills? I just think back to the metaphor of my Aunt Helen and my dad. Imagine if he just had, 20 minutes and had to make a blanket, and then another 20 minutes and had to make a blanket. Like he needed a process. in order to make that happen. And he needed feedback throughout the process too. And so those 2 points are really essential in writing instruction. But you're right. I feel like I didn't learn how to revise. I think I taught myself how to revise by teaching kids how to revise. So that might be why I enjoyed that part of the process so much.
Well,
But
speaking of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that because of that, that we were like writing quickly, handing it in, getting it graded, that we're hard on ourselves when our first draft is not the best.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see it every day with first time novelists, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're taking on this monumentally challenging project that they've never done before, and then they just berate themselves with self criticism when it's not perfect the first
Yeah.
shot,
Yeah.
right? When the most professional author you know does not get it perfect the first shot. It doesn't work that
Exactly.
way.
Exactly. And maybe if we could realize that when we're writing, we're almost like a conductor in an orchestra. We have to know every instrument and how to play them, number one. We need to know what we want the music to sound like, who's coming in where, and do that all at once. And we don't have to be conductors. We can, start with the flute section if we want to. And that's maybe our first draft. And
Yeah.
then, we bring in the next layer. It's expecting too much from our minds and not giving our minds the opportunity to really create something that is uniquely ours.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, while we're talking about systems and processes versus perhaps this idea that either I have talent or not,
Yeah.
one of the first things I say when I start a new group program is like, I really don't care how talented you are. I'll take hard work and discipline and habit
Mm-hmm.
formation over
Yeah.
talent any day.
Yeah.
So for the most talented writer, sorry, no, the most successful and effective writers that you've
Mm-hmm.
taught and worked with,
Mm-hmm.
were there skill sets that you saw them demonstrating other than some natural born talent that allowed them to succeed?
Yes. And I think the most brilliant writer in my life is the editor and now dear friend of my first 2 books. And her name is Wendy Murray. And aside from just having that natural inclination to really create beauty on the page, she has an incredibly deep knowledge of words.
Hmm.
And because of that knowledge and the vast number of words that she understands and what they often mean in comparison to each other, also mixed in with almost like a cleverness um, to it. I really think that the depth of vocabulary can make a very big difference in how we create on the page.
I love it. I mean, when you say clever, the second anyone says clever, I instantly think of Oscar Wilde. And
Yes.
I think there's a perfect example of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Playing with words on the page,
Yes.
the importance of being earnest, right? He's
Yes.
playing with words right in the title of the play.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And his final words, either I go or this wallpaper goes.
Wonderful,
Yes.
wonderful. Well, for people who want to learn more about the new book,
Mm-hmm.
what can they do? Where can we send them?
Sure. So my website holds a lot of resources, including a link to where the book can be purchased or more information about it. And my website is pattymcgee.org, but Patty is spelled with a Y. If we look for Patty McGee with an I, that is a very famous skateboarder from the 60s. And I'm not sure how much work she's done about writing. So it's pattymcgee.org. And or just Google Not Your Granny's Grammar. It's kind of a catchy. title, I've been told. So
And is that book targeted at teachers or at teachers and students, or who's the target market for that book? Who should pick it up?
the target market is teachers um, of, I would say, like second grade, 7-year-olds and up. That said, I co-authored this book with Tim Donahue, who is who understands grammar in a way that I've never understood, but that's because of the ecosystem he grew up in. His parents were English teachers, so they like bequeathed their grammar knowledge to him. And then he also, in order to graduate college with an English degree, he had to pass this one grammar class. And to pass, you had to get an A. And then he became an English teacher, and like his kids, he talks about like dinner time. He told me that his fourth grader came home and was like, so and so used a semicolon today. So what he did for this book is the last very significant section of it is a grammar refresher,
Mm.
which I would like that to become a book in and of itself as well. So for those of us who are unsure about grammar, just that part of the book alone, um, the way Tim explains things, and then there's a QR code there where you can watch Tim teach the lessons and build understanding through the videos too. So it's just kind of priceless, and it's also cute because he set up a dry erase board in his basement, and his 3 boys helped him by recording the sessions that he's teaching. And so I think that section of the book is incredibly valuable for everyone.
Wonderful. I have uh, children, 10 to 16, and so obviously education and literature and writing is so important to me. And so
Yeah.
um when I came across you, I was really excited to have you on the show and to talk about this stuff because I'm an author and I'm a writing coach, but I'm also a parent of
Yes.
kids trying to navigate literacy in as a world where technology is changing by the moment, and they're
Right.
trying to get their heads wrapped around things. And so, thank you not just for joining me on the podcast today, but for the work that you do. I think it is
Thank you.
so important.
Thank you. Well, I just appreciate the conversation. I really love the intersection of writers, of novelists, of writing coaches out in the world, and the connection to teachers and students, and how it overlaps. It really is a beautiful and I think unique conversation we just had.